Hello and welcome to the TGS podcast. I am, as always, joined by Tim. Mate, how you doing?
Very good, John, you?
Yeah, pretty good. Season's over, which is sad.
I know. It's really sad. We were talking earlier on that it gets to about 11 o'clock and you just want a sausage and a glass of Prosecco now, don't you, even though you're working in the office?
Yeah, my bodily calorie intake is about 6,000 a day, just to be happy.
Yeah, it's sad. But there we go. We got the exciting bit of February and March to get through, haven't we? That's
I
great.
presume you're out in Spain several times.
Yeah, if only. I don't lead your lifestyle. If I led your lifestyle, I would be in Spain twice and then probably off to Tierra del Fuego to do a bit of fishing, shoot some doves up in Cordoba.
And TGS will be bankrupt. Yeah.
Yeah. So
It's a tough life being responsible with money.
yeah,
Yeah.
right.
We actually have a guest today and something very serious to talk about. Tim, would you like to introduce them?
Yeah, so today we've got Olivia Byron, who is the Firearms Licensing Liaison Officer for the National Gamekeepers Organisation. Not only that, Olivia is a magistrate. She has a master's law degree, a master's degree in engineering, is a safeguarding officer for the NHS, and has been a RNLI lifeboatman. So basically, Livia is Superwoman. Hello, Livia.
Hello, Tim. Hello, Johnny.
So, Livia, you are now working with the NGO's Firearms Department.
I am, yeah, for my sins.
I suppose the biggest question on everyone's lips at the moment is firearms license fee increase. What is going on? What does the future hold in that sector? And on that massive wide question, I leave it up to you.
Gosh, that is a really wide question. So if you look at Facebook, everybody's up in arms at the moment that it's jumped such a huge increase. The grant of a firearm certificate is now £198. Grant of a shotgun's £194. It's an increase of about 125, 127%. And people are wondering why and why have the police done this? There hasn't been an increase in 10 years. And in that 10 years, there's been an awful lot going on behind the scenes. We've had the really terrible mass shootings, which have led to this. We've had the Durham. We've had Derek Bird in Cumbria, Michael Atherton, and of course, down in the West Country. And that's what's led to the police and the Home Office and the government having to look at all this legislation, which has been really piecemeal for the last 40 years. There's been bits and pieces here, then everywhere, and no consistency.
It's worth mentioning that fee increase 10 years ago was like £2 or something, wasn't it? It was a minor increase.
So what they're looking to do now is the full cost recovery. The police forces are very much like the local councils, where they're given a set amount of money, and out of that amount of money, they have to run all the different departments. Firearms is quite a contentious subject for many police forces. They're given set amount of money and they've got to look after the roads, they've got to look after knife crime and various other aspects. We have been under that budget for a long time, and it's too much money for them to run the departments on. So they're looking at it as a leisure device. So they want us to pay the full cost of recovery for those licensing, so it doesn't come out of the police budget.
So I suppose looking from that sort of Facebook perspective, one of the bigger things is that they made us have these licenses in the first place and ergo they should pay for it. How true is that, legally speaking?
It's like anything. We go for a license, it's like you go for a road license. Technically, the government should keep all the roads completely safe. But to do that, they need the funds to do it. They haven't got limited pockets to do so. With the full cost recovery for this, it is more the cost that's been worked out over the UK of how much it is just for the grants and the renewals. So the police themselves are still having to do the actual policing work behind it. So what they're having to do is they've got people in the office doing the grants and renewals, but there's actual policing work that needs to be done alongside that. So if there's any road rage, if there's any incidents going on throughout the life of that licence, that's when their policing comes in. So the full cost recovery is not going to run the full firearms team, but what it's going to do is just pay towards those grants of licences. Which, should it fall under the police or should it be privatised? We still need to be licensed.
Liv, I've got a question. So I was talking to a firearms licensing department last week, and they were saying it's not enough. It's not enough money. It doesn't pay for it. So I pointed out to them that before the 10th of February, the lights were still on in the firearms licensing department. The heating was still on. They were still getting paid at the end of every month, and they still managed to do a service a bit poorly, but they still provided the service. So this is an uplift. This is a bonus, no matter what it is. So personally, I don't think they should be complaining. I think they should be working out how to streamline and make these incredibly high fees for what we used to work for them, and then see how they can work within those budgets, which are going to be greatly increased.
Oh, it's a great point for what we're used to. You fish, right?
Yes,
How much is your fishing license over a 5-year period?
quite a lot more than the firearms certificate.
And what do you have to do to get that fishing license?
I go to the post office or online, and I spend a lot of money for the Environment Agency to not do anything. Yeah, I see your point, actually.
I mean, the Environment Agency do something. I should be on their side there. Hey, they stop people netting over Southampton water. That's something.
Yes, they do. But they don't really, they're not doing the same work that's behind the scenes of a firearms certificate.
Yes, comparatively. So I think, just playing devil's advocate, I still think, I mean, £195 is 127% uplift, as you said. It's still not bad value looking at every other country in the world. To just even get like a hunting license in Germany, for example, is a huge amount of money. And I want everything to be free, but it's still not that bad.
I put my head above the parapet and wait for Facebook to start. It's not terribly bad when you start comparing it to things. What it means is, it will hopefully make my job easier, is I've got more sway to then go and say to people, we're paying you now. We're paying you proper money. So we actually want more of a service.
We can actually demand that it's done inside of 12 months, potentially, as a start.
That would be good, wouldn't it? Essex and Warwickshire managed to get it done in weeks, let alone, they don't even go into months sometimes. So the disparity between all the forces really needs a kick up the backside. And hopefully, with this injection of money, they can put it into the budget. They know more what they're getting. I think Kent's got about 24,000 licence holders. So they can work out throughout the years how much money they've got, the revenue that's coming into there. They can then look at staffing. But this is the thing, I've been reassured. I was at the Felwig meeting, which is the National Police Firearms meeting. The Chief Constable, who's oversees the firearms licensing, has promised, how faithfully, but she's promised that the money will be coming into that firearms arena and being ring-fenced. So then people can budget and work out what staff they need. And once they work out the staff they need, then you're getting better training. What you may not know is there's lots of FEO courses which are being developed, which we were asked for our input in at the firearms meeting. So we're able to have firearms officers nationwide who are all singing off the same hymn sheet. Because I get a lot of calls that Jack down the road's doing this, Ted up north is doing this, and nobody knows where they are. So once they're trained, they know how to fill out forms, they know how to speak to people, they know how to check security, then things will speed up. At the moment, a lot of the departments have got people in there that are off sick, that are desk bound, and they're bouncing around jobs. So they're hoping to get staff in there that are more permanent and more knowledgeable and have done the courses.
Would it ergo make sense to have this done on a national scale and actually have like a national centre and a national body to oversee and be a centre for this? Or is it better to keep it regional and hope that they all fall in line?
The plan is that it all falls in line. They all do this course, and everybody's singing from the same hymn sheet. Are you edging towards privatisation, which may be a better way of doing it? So the fees go off like we do with the MedCert certificates for the GPs. You have a company that just deals with all the forms, all the paperwork, takes the medical certificate, checks it, and says, yes, that's fine. Puts it like a passport checking when you go on holiday and you fill your passport papers out. They give it to the police and say, here you go, this person has passed all these checks, here's all their details. Now you've got to do the actual policing part. Because that's the issue. The police can look back on all of the details. NHS only hold your medical records for 10 years. They don't need to hold it any longer than that. The police can then check back and do the policing that they've got to do. And they're getting so much tighter on that with the suitability that's come in, especially after Michael Atherton, who, if people aren't aware of him, he killed his partner, his sister, his daughter, turned the gun on himself. And it was Durham Police it's a systematic failure for Durham Police. He shouldn't have been given the licence. There was a long history of domestic violence. They are the only people that hold those records. I've got a lot of people coming to me on renewal now and saying, I had a girlfriend 20 years ago. She went and said something about me to the police because you've got all this coercion as quite a new thing within the police, control and coercion, sort of a lot of domestic violence or domestic abuse now, not domestic violence, is quite mental rather than physical. So any report of that, then people aren't seen as an upstanding person that should have a shotgun. But that hasn't come up in the last couple of renewals for that person, but it's come up now because the police can check back that far. They can tell you whether you've had a parking ticket or a driving fine, and that is very negative because they are so risk averse that they don't want to put their name to something, hand it to you, and then something awful happen, and it's their fault. It's
Liv, organisationally, we're going off topic a bit.
Yeah, sorry.
The podcast. No, that's why we do it. We'd start talking about elephants later on and stuff like that. I imagine they always go somewhere.
Sellers. You're going to talk about sellers, aren't you?
They go down a weird route eventually. But organisationally, you get, and I know because we work together, and sometimes calls are filtered through me to you and Alan. There's a lot of people who are renewing who have only just remembered they've got to declare an offence, and they may not have done for the previous 2 renewals because there's more things, there's more checks and more measures. And I know Liv and Alan get a lot of problems and a lot of calls where you're there to help people through the process, aren't you, and advise them. I know the last step is you'll talk to the police, but the first step is to get the member through the process, isn't it? And that's what you do a lot. It's quite often you talk us through it, but quite often it's you just explaining to them what they need to put on the forms, isn't it?
Yeah, it's how honest you need to be. If you don't remember when you were 15 that you were scrumping in an orchard or you broke someone's window and there was a caution, then you may not know the date. Just put, as a teenager, this happened. Because your honesty is what they like. I had a chap up in Thames Valley and he had an exciting youth, probably the best way of putting it. He didn't put anything down. And they came back and said, well, actually, reapply to us in 5 years' time because we want to see more of you, or less of you, actually, as it turns out, less of you, but you have to put these down. And if you don't know the dates and times, just put you don't know it. Honesty is the way forward for all of this.
And can they do that? Can they say, we don't hear from you for 5 years?
Yeah, because they're not going to grant the licence then. It's an indication of, actually, we don't like what's in your record. We don't like what's there. But if you come back in a year or so, we'll have another look at it.
So firearms departments do accept that people change for the better. I mean, evidently the whole system is gauging whether you've changed for the worst over the course of your license ownership, but they are happy that you could change. And I've seen it many times where people have had checker pass and then got a license, but often that's not the case depending on the county. And so we're hoping that in like this standardization of FEO training, that will become a thing.
Yeah, I mean, it's the better forces I find that are doing that. It's the forces that you can get through to, that you can speak to. There's a couple, I'm not going to drop names in, but there's a few forces where you'll send them an email and you have to wait till it gets to the top of the pile. When it gets to the top of the pile, they'll acknowledge you and then you just get filed. There's quite a few forces like that. The ones that you can speak to that actually acknowledge the reason that you want the gun, be it that you want to go clay shooting, be it that you're game shooting, they're the more human ones. And they're actually the officers which are much more engaged with people and want people to not fail. The police don't necessarily want everybody to fail and say, absolutely, we don't want you to have guns. They've just
Not
got
according to Facebook.
Yeah, not according to Facebook. And a lot of forces will spoon feed people through the process, but they're the good forces that have got people and you can get hold of.
I remember at the British Shooting Show, well, every year at the British Shooting Show, I'll end up having a chat with an FEO, not from my home county, but from a county that is a shooter who's just there either for work or for pleasure. And I often wish that that was my FEO.
Yes.
How fun would it be how much of a conflict of interest is it for every FEO to have a shooting background? Is there any conflict of interest there at all? Or is it better that they're independent? Like, what is the ideal FEO?
I don't think there is a conflict. A lot of FEOs will clay shoot and target shoot. No, I don't think there's a conflict because they're professional people. They're generally ex-military or ex-police anyway. So I think there's, as long as they declare it and they know it and they're not treating people any differently, I don't think it is a problem. But for them to actually have that interest,
let's make it a lot easier when they know what a 3006 is.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I live in Brighton, so a lot of the officers down here, the FEOs, don't shoot. And it is harder when you're trying to explain something to them. It's not a conflict of interest at all. I think if you like boats, you go and work at sea. If you like horses, you go and work with horses. It's something that you lead into.
I still find it extraordinary. I can remember many years ago, the NGO had a firearms licensing head called George Wallace, George was fantastic, and he was very much the old school when it came to dealing with firearms licensing teams. He was probably slightly more headstrong than you or Alan would be. But I can remember being in a meeting in the Home Office with him, and he said, look, it's absolutely quite extraordinary at the minute. He said, I go to the DVLA for my driving license, I go to the Home Office for my passport, and I go to my local copper for my firearms certificate. And he said it's absolutely bonkers, and it's why it costs so much money. And that's leading us on to the privatization or centralization.
Departmentization.
Yeah, how we want to look at it. But from memory, and Liv, you might be able to steer us on this, it's the chief police officers who want to retain the ownership of it at the minute, isn't it? As soon as they get the chance to get rid of it, they panic and want to keep it.
I think they want to keep it because it's crime within their area, and if they know who's holding guns, it's a lot more on their system. The police systems throughout the country do not tie up with each other at all. They all run on different systems, it's quite shocking. You think that you could drive from here to Norfolk and you'd be on the same software. I mean, it's beyond my pay grade, all of this, I don't really understand it, but it's not. It's on completely different systems.
Can I just make a point for people listening to the podcast? It is 2025. Just in case you thought you'd drop back into the 80s.
Yeah.
It's quite extraordinary. Sorry, Liv, go on.
It's bizarre. It's completely bizarre. And on that case, some forces don't want you to use paper forms anymore. You can use paper forms. It's against human rights for you not to be able to use paper forms. But
I'm glad that's a human right.
It is a human right to be able to use that. It's why we've got the Human Rights Act. It's fantastic.
It is my human right to use a paper form.
Yeah, which I think's right. But because the annoying thing is, you go online and you start filling out the form, and I've done it for a lot of people, and if they don't have a detail, it crashes, and you can't go back to that page. But Hampshire have got a different system, and you can go back to that page.
Yeah,
now.
I was going to say, I've done mine through Hampshire. Hampshire is actually a fantastic online system. Really, really intuitive.
Yes.
So
But
we need
Sussex
41 other forces to copy what Hampshire are doing.
Only with the online application form.
Oh, yeah, not the way they behave as a firearms licensing department. No, that'd be a disaster.
Which is very safe. Very safe gun county. So they don't do anything bad, just maybe not as quickly as other counties. But there's a lot more people here than in other counties, in many other counties. Hampshire's got a lot of people.
And you've got an island as well. So
Do you want
very
it?
spread.
It does. It does.
Very spread. No, I know that Lou down there who runs it, she's very nice actually, and she's quite new in post. And she's come in, again, looking at a lot of suitability. So a lot of the delays down there are looking at suitability. And I think they've had quite a lot of staff illness down there as well. So they've been quite man down, not making excuses for them, but it just highlights that different forces have got different...
Well, post-COVID, they got it down to 2 months. Unbelievably, and then went back up to return to form. I think is probably the best way of putting it. They returned to form after COVID.
So, in your opinion, if you could have the Carlsberg of all firearms licensing departments, how would it run? So, what are
you looking for?
Yeah,
what's the ideal?
Connectivity, timescales, etc.
Timescales.
What would make your life easier?
What would make my life easier? Oh gosh.
Going to work for someone else.
Yeah, no licenses at all.
I think there isn't. It's like buying a house. I think that's probably the best way to put it. I've bought and sold a house once before in a month, but I was buying somebody's house that were moving into a care home and I had nothing to sell. That was nice and easy. There were just searches to be done. Wonderful. A lot of people struggle with their GP, hence we recommend MedCert. And so GPs can hold people back dramatically. So then it's not down to the firearms. But I would like to think that they could turn something around in 6 weeks. I can't see why they can't. From getting the form, speaking to the GPs if need be, from going out and visiting, doing the home visit, sometimes that doesn't tie up. People work from home, some people don't work from home, some people are only home at weekends, evenings. There's a lot going on there.
Regarding home visits, what's the purpose for visiting the home is mostly to check security, correct?
No.
Is what, to see if they've got what, dead bodies?
Children in the basement, that sort of thing.
Yeah, because you wouldn't just chuck that in your neighbour's basement for the time being.
They are.
What kind of street do you live on?
I live in
It's
Southampton.
Hampshire.
Right? It was a real cultural shock moving to a city, I can assure you.
So, for example, we'll suggest a gentleman has applied for his licence. They will go and talk to the wife, or if it's a lady, they'll go and talk to the partner. The FEOs are not even encouraged, they're told to do that. So they want to speak to spouses. They want to leave their card in case there's something that they can't talk about at the time, because they need a holistic picture of that person. And
Do
that's
they
why
check
they're
social
coming to
media?
your home. I'd say probably yes.
Interesting.
I would say probably yes. If there's something that piques their interest, then yes. They look at the picture of that person. They'll come round and they'll have a look at everything. But it's one of those Morty Vicker sort of moments where you can just put the best biscuits on and they'll be fine. But no, they will come and have a look at everything, as well as your security. And there's lots of moves now. I mean, I think it's been since 2020, I think, top of my mind. They'll look at the area you're in. They'll look at the crime in that area. They'll look at the issues, how many guns you've got. And people are now finding they're asked to put alarms in. Well, I didn't have an alarm last time you did the grant. Yeah, but we now want you to have an alarm.
Yeah, and you've bought another 5 guns or whatever.
Yeah, even with the same amount of guns. They look at the area that you live in, the crime in that area. So I've just moved and I've actually split my guns into different... They've got a lot more cabinets going on now because the amount of weapons I've got in here, you know, we're good for the zombie apocalypse. That they're going to like the fact that they're separated and dotted around the house. But that way, if someone breaks in, they're not getting all of my guns in one cabinet in one go. So it's things like that they're looking at as well. And that's catching a lot of people out.
How high is gun crime with relating to licensed guns? Like, how many guns are being stolen?
It's pretty low. It's pretty low. Statistics, I think John did some work on it recently from NGO. It's really low. I can't think of the figure off the top of my head, but it's the guns that they want to get off the street, and they're having amnesty at the moment on TVRs. So they are working on getting illegally held guns off the street. What always panics me is sometimes we get people phoning in and saying, oh, we found a gun in someone's house, you know, and it's illegally held. Grandpa had it in the loft for years. How do I get that to the police station? We get a lot of calls about that. And it's a case of, well, please promise me that you'll take it, because you're illegally holding a gun, and they will come for you on that, and that will go into their statistics. And we don't want that to happen, because at some point it was a gun that was held for sport, but the police are worried that will fall into the wrong hands.
Just as an example, I've just Googled it as you were speaking.
I'm trying to look on my emails.
This is just the Met Police, but within the last 3 years, 4 offences have been recorded as having been committed by lawful holders of firearms and their legally held guns. 3 of these were committed under the Firearms Act and 1 offence under the Criminal Damage Act. So the 3 offences under the Firearms Act could well be they weren't secured properly. And, well, someone's clearly shot a window out or a street light or something. So in 3 years, that's in the Metropolitan Police area.
Google the same for illegal guns.
Google the same for illegal.
Yeah. Same for illegal guns in the Met. That's going to be quite frightening.
I appreciate gun safety, having run gun stores and had incredible safety restrictions. Is it, if the crime is currently low, then the system currently works? Why are they going harder?
Tim just went wow, so I'm wondering what wow is.
Sorry. So in the year ending September 2023, there were 6,233 firearm offences in England and Wales, a 3% increase with illegally held firearms. So that's considerably more.
What's that? Percent?
I think we do have to say one was the Met Police area only, and one is a national statistic. But I can't believe that the mean streets of Needham Market we're going to have as many as the Met. But yeah, so we're not saying you shouldn't look after your guns, but what we're saying is, generally speaking, those people who've bothered to go through the application process, generally speaking, are law-abiding, security-conscious citizens, I guess.
Yeah, it does feel weird that that they are increasing security, right, when it clearly works already, or does it not? Like, what is the purpose of putting an alarm in for somebody who didn't once have one?
Well, I think they've just taken 6,000 odd guns off the street in the last year, so they're going to need some more on the street.
That's a fair point.
Yeah,
Realistically,
I see what you're saying. So there's an incentive. The police have been successful in clearing. So there's an incentive for the criminals to break into your house to obtain some more illegally held guns. And that statistic could be misleading as well, because once it's left Livia's possession into somebody else's possession, it then becomes illegally held, doesn't it?
if someone else has got it, it becomes illegal.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
Yeah. And also, you think now we have people walking into people's houses and stealing Rolexes and jewellery. There's a huge increase in that. So if someone's going to walk into your house, there's a lot more sophisticated crime going on with house intrusions. If they see a shotgun cabinet, they're going to take it.
So I've got a great prevention for that. Oh, so actually, let's take my case study. I've got an old sofa on my front lawn that I have not yet taken to the tip. Case point 1. Now, that's my first level of prevention, is that they see the sofa on the front lawn and go, he clearly has got nothing. And then if they were to break in, they'd find that I've got nothing. It's like it's an amazing defense.
Have you still got that old car parked? And what was that thing you bought last year? That
Oh, no. I've got nothing.
sofa, old car, kid in the nappy.
No, they'll come in. I won't tidy the house. I'll just let the children make it look like it's already been robbed. And we're going to go, we're too late.
We feel sorry for him. We'll leave him a Rolex and walk out.
Liv, on the... So, total cost recovery, I'm going to try and get us back on track. Normally it's me causing the problems. It's you today. But I'm going to try and get us back on track. So total cost recovery has happened. No, or not quite. We're not quite on the date, are we?
Yeah,
it was 5th of February. It happened.
Yes,
5th of February.
just after.
Did you not watch the NGO film on it?
I think I did the NGO film on it. Anyway, which is
Dementia.
So head over to the NGO YouTube channel and you can see me talking about all the facts I clearly memorised for the whole thing. So total cost recovery nationally is going to happen. The fees are set.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry to interrupt.
Yes.
Total cost recovery at £190 something isn't what they call total cost recovery.
I've explained that already.
Yeah, so that's the difference you explained earlier.
Yeah.
Is that the admin cost is 194, but the total cost of a license, including the policing, is 600 odd, whatever it was.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we got off lightly.
Well, it looks.
Could be more.
We shouldn't be paying for policing because we're already paying for that in the stipend.
I don't disagree.
But
it's great. You said that in the video. Great video.
So I remember.
Did you say I pay my taxes, so I expect policing?
And yes, and stamp. You got to metaphorically bang the table. Liv, can you just give us a bit of background? So as the shooting organisations, because it's the old Johnny and I talk about this a lot on the podcast, and I get really annoyed about the Judean People's Front.
People's Front of Judea.
Yeah, because we've never done anything to help shooters, because that's not fundamentally what we're here to do, clearly, according to social media.
Yeah.
So can you just step back a bit and just say what we collectively, you and Alan did, and then the second part of the question is, what have we asked for? So
how involved were you, and what does the future look like?
What does the future look like? What are the NGO asking the police to do now they've got all this filthy lucre?
So Alan started off by attending meetings, bless him, with sort of Home Office, and he sort of prepared arguments against the cost going up, but then agreed that actually we do need to increase to a certain degree, but it has to limit the fees to recover the full cost of the licensing process, not the full cost of the policing. So we've argued that's happened. I, as I said, went up to the Felwood meeting at the College of Policing, which they've invited me back to as well this year, which I must, and I ate lots of biscuits. But they're very good, and they ask our opinions. They want to know from the shooting organisations how this is going to impact, what they can do. And again, as I said, the FEO course we're quite heavily involved in.
So this is not just an us versus them. This is us working together.
Yeah, we couldn't fight against something that we know is coming, but what we can do is shape it. We can add our 2 pennies worth. We can argue against it. It's checks and balances. That's what I sort of say our role is with them, is checks and balances, because they're blindly going along thinking, oh, we've got to find all this money, or how are we going to find it? Okay, find it this way. We'll support that to a degree. However, you can't be not ring fencing it for this. So we've had lots of discussions with them, lots of input with it, which is ongoing as well, to try and get them working. So I've sat there at the conference and said, look, Essex, fantastic. Paul, who I've spoken to today, actually, you go and have a chat with this force over there because they're really struggling. Tell them how you're doing it. So we're quite involved in that aspect of it as an invited guest. And it's quite nice to be an invited guest to something like this because they want you there, as opposed to someone that's just turns up. So we're just continuing really to fight and put the members' voices out there to get the best service that we can get because we're now paying for it.
How do we get the worst performing forces to the same level as the best performing forces? I know it's not necessarily your job, but
by the sound of it, offer them more biscuits. That seems to be the trading currency.
They work on biscuits. They really do. I think there needs to be a lot more transparency, and then we are attending a lot more meetings now. So each force is meant to, I say meant to, because I'm still arguing with Sussex at the moment that they haven't had one, have a firearms licensing meeting. And Alan and I will spread ourselves out around the country, going to various meetings. So hence I've been down to Hampshire, met Lou, had a chat with her, and they're very open in these meetings, as is Kent. They'll say, this is the picture where we are. This is our outstanding. This is what we're thinking of doing. This is sort of a pie chart of how our office is working. Kent, for example, was saying, the way their licensing falls, what they were going to do is offer people a chance to renew before the price increase, because then it would cut their workload down as the years roll on. So if you're going to renew last year, then it'd be 5 years from that. But rather it being very heavy on renewals, which somehow it seems to fall on, they're sort of working it back way. But it's taking Alan and I think, going around different forces saying, well, have you tried this? They're doing that.
Because there's case studies of good forces, and so you kind of can see a solution, or there are solutions ready for them. This isn't an unsolvable problem.
It's shadowing, I think, between the forces, and a lot of that comes down to staffing. The police force, along with, I'm ex-military and used to move from post to post with certain years, and you'd walk into something and think, I've not got a clue what this role involves, but in 3 years I'll be an expert, sort of thing. Oh, and I'll just be leaving. And that's the same way the police is happening as well. So you get an officer come in as part of their paid role to jazz up the firearms office, but then you've still got the FEOs in there as well. So the FEOs course will hopefully bring them up to a professional standard. They'll be able to support the top brass that comes in to oversee the department, and the department will run nicely with the FEOs that are now professionals. But it's just getting that standardization across the UK, and that comes, I think, from a lot of these meetings with us being involved and going to. And I always walk in and say to the police force, I'm not here to debate you, I'm here to support you. I'm the buffer between me and the members who are getting really cross that you're not answering the phone or doing anything. So I'll buffer that for you, but work with me.
With this, with an increase in fees, a lot of people said, look, I don't mind paying the extra. I did work it out earlier. It works out to 76p a week, I think, or it's very little. So I don't mind paying the extra as long as I get the service I'm paying for. So we don't want to go out for a meal and have really bad food and really bad service. You'd probably complain. Will there be additional recourse now or not?
There should be. And that's where, if something does go drastically wrong or takes time, because there's got to be a bedding in period with this. Fortunately, it can't be a case of, well, I've paid my money and actually, do you know what, I expect it now. There'll be a bedding in period. As I said at the beginning of this, it's all budgeted, and the budgets are done sort of yearly by the Police and Crime Commissioner. They'll say, we're allocating X amount to this. Yes, you've got your full cost recovery, but there's additional money that needs to go into there. And the people that genuinely have the issue with it are the slightly more complex cases sometimes. So, they don't see what's going on behind the scenes of, oh, they're just checking this, or this has been lost, or your GP's not come back. So there'll be that bedding in process. But once that's done, so 6 months to a year, actually, if they're not performing, that's when we can go to the Chief Constable, we can go to the Police and Crime Commissioner. I have gone actually to the head of the College of Policing, the Felwick chap, and sort of said, can you help us out here? Previously. So there's a lot of communication, but it's just got to be bed it in, and then, we've got a lot more recourse. You're paying for a service.
Overall, we're not happy that it's more money, but it's not that much money, so it could have been much worse. This more money should give us a better service, but it's going to take some time, and so it's not the end of the world.
No, I don't think it is. Of course, none of us like paying more, but everything's more. Petrol's more.
I mean, if we just look at the basic, actual cost of living inflation over the last 5 years, it's not far off 100% anyway, so...
Yeah. Do we think... That's more of a question for you, actually, John. You're heavily involved in clay shooting.
Yeah, I do a bit.
You do a bit. I watched you do a video or two now and again. I think game shooting's a different story, and certainly gamekeeping, Liv, is definitely a different story because it's like an HGV driver. We have to have these things, right? So we need them as a gamekeeper. You can't not have them. Is it going to stop people clay shooting?
I think if we look at the big picture here, it's 76p a week to have a license, you said.
Something like
that
that
ballpark, right? To go and shoot 100 clays is £40 for the clays, £30 for the ammo, £70 to go and shoot 100 clays. I mean, a bit less on certain grounds, a bit more other grounds, but let's say on the round it's 70 quid. 100 quid if you get yourself a beer and a burger afterwards and chuck some diesel in your car. I don't want to sound like an arsehole, but it's going to come across that way. If you are worried about the extra £100 per 5 years, you're probably not shooting that many clays.
Yeah.
That's as simple as that, right?
I get the logic. I do get the logic. So, I mean, I think the trouble is some of the announcement, I think there's a couple of things. The announcement was sprung on us, Liv. That's right, isn't it?
Yeah.
We knew it was coming, but we didn't know it was coming tomorrow.
Yeah, and they put the date in literally tomorrow.
It was the change of government. It was manifesto, and you never know what they're going to promise and deliver, do you, on those? And it was just one they ran.
Usually opposite things.
Exactly. So there were some issues there. So there wasn't the time to get the messaging out. So when people heard it was going to happen, social media explodes like it does, not just in our sector, it's any sector. And I was looking at things saying 600 quid for a shotgun and firearms certificate, 400 quid. One bloke put 1,290, I think.
Isn't it like it's 400 quid for an RFD?
Yeah, it's 400 quid for an RFD, but you've only got to sell 100 guns to make the price.
That was a big increase.
Yeah, that's a big
466.
466 up from 200.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the RFD.
But it is a huge amount of work for them.
So I won't, because mine's are different. Mine's for journalism and stuff. That I won't be able to keep that. That just simply doesn't stack up to me. With my RFD, that figure's too high. I can see that, but I just can't understand where people got the figures from, unless they're looking at the RFD figure.
No, the manifesto. The original manifesto said the full cost recovery was £600.
It did have higher figures.
We did a thing on it.
Quite a relief when it came out. Yeah, it's quite a relief.
We did a thing on it, which I've forgotten.
Yeah.
Quite a lot of what we do is obviously quite interesting.
Yes. To me, maybe. Clearly not to you. Sorry, back on track.
I think the worry for me when the figures were coming out was we're a gamekeepers organisation. You know, it's not the highest salaries in the world, let's be honest. It's vocational. Is it going to affect people? As you say, 76 pence, it's not a huge increase. But
the estate can pay that, right? Though in my head, like if you're a keeper struggling to pay your extra £100 for your firearms license, that's a work expense.
Well, yeah, you say that.
A work expense, yeah.
Surely.
Yeah,
tax deductible.
You were a Sparshot student, and you ended up working for a friend of ours, mine, who I know what he would have paid you.
Yeah.
And it would have been in Haribo, probably, knowing him. So
yeah, it was a lot of money. But you know what I did? And the same as I do now. If I want something that's quite a lot more money than just, walk-in cash, I sacrifice something else for it. Or I save up.
Well, yeah, but there's a difference. The point that Liv made is that you were doing it back then because you had to have it for your work.
Mm.
Yeah.
Right? And as a trainee, I'm playing devil's advocate a bit here. As a trainee, that's quite a lot of money.
So it's like running a car and you need one of those for work.
You do, but your boss pays that. I see. Yeah, okay.
Your boss doesn't pay
I've
for your
just
car.
fallen right into that trap.
Yeah.
Life is really effing
That's
expensive.
tough.
Mate. That's just the way it is.
But at the very start of the podcast, Liv said something which I should have asked the question then. I just remembered it. When they did the costings, Liv, the rationale behind cost recovery for the admin part of it, so you've got to emphasise it's not the policing part, is the fact that it's a recreational activity. But it's not for everybody.
Could there be dispensation for professionals?
That was my next question, but I think that's probably too complicated.
Yeah, but I just want to also point out that there's an awful lot of government-mandated shit that you have to pay for that is entirely to do with one's job or anything like that, and you still have to pay for it.
HGV licence?
Yeah, any kind of ticketing or licensing, you got to pay for it.
Yeah.
There's also... now I'm going to get right... This is completely...
Driving licence is not free.
Don't get me started on public tips and pickup trucks, right? So I now have to. This is much more.
You get
important
a special license, don't you?
Yes,
Yep.
and this is more important than firearms license.
Why don't you just chuck on the side of the road like everyone else?
That's why people chuck it on the side of the road, because we're paying our flipping council tax, and just because I've got a pickup truck, I now need to pay to go to the tip. Used to get 8 free visits, I now get none.
That seems fair because 8 free visits wouldn't cover anyone commercial.
I can get more in my wife's estate car than I can in my thing, so I put all the asbestos in that now.
Well, have you got any free visits left? Can I put my sofa in the back of your truck?
No security.
Just love the idea of you living in Totton with a sofa on.
You see, I used to joke about people like me.
What were we talking about again?
You went on a rant about it, like, professionals needing to pay it, but if you need it for your job, are you telling me there's not a gamekeeper out in the world who doesn't actually enjoy the gun aspect of their job as one of like the benefits, the juicy bits?
I'm not going to tell you that because that's probably why they all own their own firearms and buy them themselves.
Yeah, otherwise they'd have an estate paid for license and use estate guns, and I don't know many keepers who just use an estate gun because it's the fun part. It's one of the fun parts of the job, right? Yeah. Why do you want to become a gamekeeper? Get to ride around with a gun and a buggy? Yeah. And then no one tells you about the horrific like hours and the pay and the actual having to work.
I do think most rational people will look at the outcome and think, oh God, this guy, I've got to got to find another 150.
It's just more money to the government, which is not fun.
But I don't think people will stop shooting from it. No. And I think there's other issues when we talk about lead and we talk about steel. I personally don't think that will stop people from shooting when the transition happens.
Yeah, I think if we just talk about the basic price increases in game shooting over the last 10 years, if that did, that would stop someone.
Yeah.
76p a week.
I mean, Liv runs heavily involved with the shoot down in Sussex. I mean, have any of your guns said to you, God, I've got to spend another £100 over 5 years for my shotgun?
I bet they have. 100% they sit there whinging.
No.
Some people complain about the cost of cartridges. Yeah. Cartridges, £120 a slam. I'm like, that's 2 pheasants.
Yeah.
It's 2 pheasants.
No. The only moans I've ever had was when all the mortgages shot up. Do you remember that? You had that huge increase. And I'd had a few people go, don't tell my wife how many days I've had because I've said we can't have a holiday, but I'm shooting.
Yeah. And that's a really good point, isn't it? Yeah. I think that's
lots of things go up and down.
We all save money for our hobbies, and you know what? Your budget might change, but you'll still earmark some cash for what you love doing.
It's a luxury.
Yeah,
and we need them. That's what we work for.
Yeah, I think so. So you're fairly confident it won't affect clay shooting?
No more than the pretty horrific inflation we've had.
Yeah,
already. Like there is way bigger global financial issues than £100 more for a firearms license in terms of actual effect upon one's income and disposable parts of it.
Yeah, I think the outcome for me would be an uplift in service for the very worst offenders.
We'd be very happy with that.
I'd be very happy if someone answered the phone at various places. Yes.
Yeah, I mean,
if they could man the phone at various forces based on this money, that'd be fantastic.
Yeah, and that will make a real difference to people who are applying or just trying to get a simple question. And actually, from an organisational point of view, and I can't speak for the others, but quite a lot of the questions that Liv and Alan will answer are really simple ones about how to fill in the form, which I've already said earlier on, that probably the Firearms Licensing Department should be answering.
Do you want to make a film on that? That'd be really clever, wouldn't it?
Yes, we have to write it down because I'll forget.
I think maybe Liv should do it because she's way more intelligent than us.
I'll do it in paper because it's my human right to write it on paper.
Yeah, but I actually, Liv, that would be a good film for John to make with you. This is how you fill out the form. This is how you get your doctor's note, and then you can save yourself a lot of time. Like, I'm going to forward you a link, and if you watch that, if you have any more problems, get in touch.
I like that. I like the link sending.
Well, Liv, I think that was really interesting.
Way more interesting than I thought it would be. Thanks, Liv, actually.
Really interesting. I think it's not the result we wanted, but I think the result will be okay. We're going to need some bedding in time. You're doing really good work for the NGO, you and Alan. I know you're really busy with it. Johnny's learnt a lot. I've forgotten a lot. And hopefully we can get you back on the podcast to talk about other firearms licensing things soon.
I think it's also worth mentioning that if you'd like to use some of Liv's time, join the NGO. Give her a call if you've got any firearms related issues. It's a pretty good service.
Definitely.
There you go.
And Johnny will put a link in the description.
100%. We'll just go to the NGO website, search NGO Gamekeepers, and it comes up on the internet. And if you want a paper application form, it is your human right to do so. So make sure you send a carrier pigeon requesting a paper membership form, or go to the British Shooting Show, and you can fill one out there.
Yeah, you can fill one out at the British Shooting Show. Join, and Liv will be at the British Shooting Show on the NGO stand on Saturday and Sunday, so you can come and see her in real life and ask her your inane questions that somebody as patient as Liv would answer, and if it was me, would just
laugh,
aggravate me. Not really.
Guys, thank you very much for listening. We'll catch you next time.
Thanks, John.